I used to be asked a lot, like, hey, what's the hardest part of buds when you're trained to become a Navy SEAL? And, what I would tell people, and it was honest and it was genuine, was like, it wasn't one thing, it was multiple things stacked on top of each other over a long period of time. And yet you can still choose to be joyful. You can still choose your disposition and your response to adversity. And I can look back in childhood and I can say, hey, that was a dark time. That was a challenging time. I can look at uh, teenage years for sure, young adulthood. And each of these touch points in life where I encountered the cross, and without a doubt, super grateful for all of those experiences. Would I want to retread them? No. Am I grateful for them? Yes, because it's in those dark moments when well, at least if you allow the Lord to transform you, you can, man, it's game changing. But that said, one of the most recent trials for me, that's most palatable when I think nearest to the boat is, you list the pedigree. And so when I get out of the military, I learned a really painful lesson, Dan, where up until that point, I was really white knuckling just about everything in my 20s and 30s, being self reliant. And you get out of the military, I moved the family. So we're in Maryland, we moved down to Louisiana. I start a company. The company needs money, the house needs money, the family needs money, the Catholic school needs money, everyone needs money. And the business is in its infancy and there's no money coming in. And I remember 2 months into the move, I'm sitting on the back porch. It's early in the morning, like uncivil hours. I shouldn't have been awake, but I was just stressed out of my mind. And I turned to the rosary, second decade of the rosary. I'm in tears, and I'm like, Lord, where are you? Like, did you bring me down here just to embarrass me? Um, and it was in that moment where I felt like I was just plummeting. Where the Lord, it was a beautiful lesson for me, and one I don't want to ever repeat, but keep it real close. He's like, look, I'm I'm not here, to hold your beer and watch you succeed. I actually want to do this with you. And I felt like up to that point, it was I was kind of on my faith was on autopilot. I was, certainly going to Sunday mass, would make daily communion when the work schedule allowed, and staying close to the Eucharist, knowing that was a source and summit of my faith, and that's where the strength was. But still very self-reliant. And it was interesting. The Lord really revealed the love of my earthly father for me, and just like through childhood, just showing me that. And he's like, "Look, Sam, I'm in your corner, but this isn't the Sam show." And it was just an invitation. Do you want to do this with me? And it was kind of mind blowing, Dan, because I realized, like, oh wow, Lord, you're actually interested in business. He's like, man, I'm interested in souls, and if souls are in business, I'm interested in business. But I don't want to just separate my relationship with you, Sam, on Sunday, and then you just do the rest of the week without me. I want you to live a fully integrated life. And um, yeah, that was, I guess, the Lord really brought me to a point where I can no longer white knuckle life, nor do I want to. And He's like, look, I want to do this with you. You are my son. And that is so hard, I think, for a masculine man in Western culture, let alone one coming from a military background, to actually say, oh, wow, divine sonship's real, and you want me to surrender to you, and you actually want to accompany me in life. And that I'm not there yet. I'm still wrestling with that, but that was transformational for me. Because the Lord took this for me, a dark one. I know we all have different, for me, that was very much hit a nerve for me, because there's a lot of pride that I encountered in that moment, and awareness of, like, wow, I have really been stiff arming the Lord in our relationship, just keeping him at arm's length. And I'm still aware of that, but it's improving. But that was transformational for me, And I've gone through a lot of physical adversity and surgeries, and every time you go through these life-changing moments, whether it's having a baby, your lack of sleep, but then you also the gift of you have a baby in the family, like all these wonderful things. When you encounter adversity, if you let the Lord transform it, the blessings on the other side are just magnificent. But I think it's how we encounter the cross. And as a Christian, it's hard for us to wrap our mind around. It's hard for me. Let me just say that it's hard for me to wrap my mind around embracing the cross, because in Western culture we are told that, especially as men, avoid suffering, pursue pleasure, pursue gain. There's a dichotomy to embracing the cross, and yet that is where the life spring. I mean, that's the key that unlocks heaven. And it was honestly just a couple years ago that I was encountering that lesson, which again I don't want to relearn. So.
Let me jump in here, Sam, because brother, I resemble every remark that you've made, and I'm sure a lot of men that are listening and watching this podcast right now, it really resonates what you're saying. Like, hey, as men, oftentimes we just take everything on ourselves. Mm-hmm. Can you dig into a little bit more, Sam? I mean, again, that pedigree, the Navy SEAL background, all this litany of all these degrees and these accomplishments, and yeah, you're out there, you're doing it. How did you come to this? How did you learn how to surrender and give it to God?
I'd say that I don't know that I've truly learned. I'm still wrestling with that, and the old man dies hard. I feel like the first several decades of my life, it was look at what I'm achieving, and I feel like on this latter chapter, or I just turned 40. Like I feel like now it's all about how to cast that stuff away and just turn towards the Lord, and that's it's a whole mindset shift. And so I'm not in a position to teach it, but I am in a position to say this is a journey that I'd encourage men to look at, because the fruits are there.
Well, so Sam, in terms of how you got to that place, were there other men in your life that you leaned on that really showed up during this time of trial that helped you to surrender and helped you to grow during that time of trial?
This is, I don't know if this is my own story here. I'm sure a lot of men can relate to this, but this was maybe 3-4 years ago. And for the last 3 years, I didn't even want to talk about it because I was still embarrassed. I'm like, oh, well, I actually was in a position where I had to surrender to the Lord, versus like I couldn't figure it out on my own or white knuckle. And so I think when guys, are just built to go into a foxhole, whether good or bad. And for me, my temperament is I bump up against the wall. I'm going to mull it over. I'm going to ruminate on it. I'm going to think about it. And I actually turned towards spiritual readings like the lives of the saints, and you realize, okay, I'm not alone there. And then from that point, I was able to venture out, start talking to guys in the parish, and I was blown away. Actually, they're like, oh yeah, dude, no one was shocked by that. They're like, oh yeah, here's my story. I'm like, oh, okay. So this isn't, I'm not the only one that encountered the cross. Everyone that is living a sacramental life is going to encounter the cross. That's how it works. We shouldn't be scared of the cross.